The Committee on Workforce Development will now come to order. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Chairman Henderson,
Here.
Vice Chair Gregory, Representatives Bangert,
Here.
Brown,
Here.
Haley,
Here.
Hurlbert,
Present.
Lewis,
Here.
Person, Railsback,
Here.
Sharp,
Here.
Thompson, Walsh Moore, Young.
Here.
With 10 members being present, we have established a quorum. We will now hold a hearing on House Bill 2498, sponsored by Representative Porter. Representative, when you're ready, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jeff Porter, State Rep for District 42, which encompasses all of Montgomery County, majority of Warren County, a portion of St. Charles County along the river of Augusta area. We're talking today about House Bill 2498, which is the classification of workers. This bill's been around at least the 3 years that I recall, basically trying to set the parameters of independent contractor status versus a W-2 type of worker. I think we need to have some kind of a program out there that has a proper classification at the state level and hopefully match up with the federal level as best as we can. Basically, this passed out of the Senate Honor, had the bill over there on the other side. It did pass out 5-1, I believe, is the vote. There's some need for us to have some kind of clarification to know what an independent contractor is. I've been a State Farm agent for 31 years, and I have an independent captive contractor contract with the company. So I understand the pros and cons. There's been various lawsuits of the years about trying to define the identity of an agent. So I know it can be in other professions as well. So to kind of give you a little bit of in-house of where I see it. So at this time, I'd entertain some questions.
Representative Banger, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just some questions. I'm a little familiar with independent contractors, but can you tell me what the details are about an independent contractor? I mean, do they pay taxes and insurance? And if you can just explain that, clarify it for me.
Basically, and like in my case, I'm an independent contractor. I have my own employees that works for me, not for the company. And basically, I pay the taxes. I take care of all the 941 taxes. I take care of all that kind of stuff day in and day out. So basically, just try to set all that up between someone that is a W-2 person.
So you don't have like workers' comp or anything like that then? You
I do have
just
workers'
get your
comp.
straight salary and then you do have workers' comp?
For my employees, I do. Mhm.
Okay. And then you collect your taxes and pay your taxes. So
I collect my taxes, yes.
like the Social Security tax, you have to pay
I do
pay
all
at the higher rate yourself?
The 941s, I do it monthly. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. So
Basically, what this program sets up is just kind of define those parameters so we have something to work off of.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Young.
Thank
Proceed.
you. To inquire. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I may have missed it, but I couldn't determine within the bill whether one of those parameters was based on revenue, which seems to be, to me, logical. There's no way, or it appears no way, I'm a small business owner, to differentiate between a small-scale business and a large-scale business.
My mind,
Whatever that-
I mean, basically, you can make as much. That's the advantage of being an independent contractor. You can make as much that you want to make in your profession that you're trying to do, whether it be insurance or working for Uber or whatever the case may be.
Well, I guess I'm thinking about employers who hire independent contractors and don't necessarily pay them. First, you mentioned Uber. Mm-hmm. So I've had friends, relatives who've worked for Uber and other services like Uber. The initial wage seems attractive, but when you add the fact that there's wear and tear on the car and all the other things and there are no benefits, then the cost really outweighs the benefits. But for Uber, they are, I don't know, multi-million-dollar company and could likely afford to categorize those folks as employees as opposed to independent contractors. So
I think it's a matter of choice.
It just seems like as an employer, you wouldn't want to have a company that makes the revenue like Uber in the same category as, a mom and pop store.
And we have some people here to testify in that effect, so they may go a little bit more detailed than what I would know. I just know from my standpoint, like in insurance, which is, I've been doing that since 1984, 91, since I've been an independent contractor myself. The more I make, the more employees I can have. I can have one employee, I can have 20 employees, and I would just have to be responsible for all the necessary paperwork, take care of the 941s, the payroll taxes, which I've been doing long time. You can use, QuickBooks, or you can use like when I first started the Dome payroll book. If you remember what those are, if you look it up, DOME, that's what used to keep track of all the taxes, because I'd make sure to take care of that every quarter. I'd make sure to have it reconciled with my CPA, make sure I'm staying on top of it. So that's the advantage of me being an independent contractor. If I got to stay on top of the taxes.
Okay, thank you.
Representative, I've got a quick question to maybe help with the committee a little bit. What workers would you anticipate this would change their working status? Could you give us some examples of what workers you think this would, if this were to pass, whose status would it change, and how would that work?
I think a lot of the witnesses behind me can go into further detail on that, to be exact, because they have a broader perspective. I look at it from just the insurance standpoint. I'm open to any kind of resolvement of this issue, because this keeps coming back up. If certain groups want to be taken out of it, I don't mind talking about it as long as both sides agree to it. So this is what this hearing's about, to kind of shake the tree and see what kind of opportunities come out of it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Representative
Thank
Banger,
you.
go proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's kind of the same question I had. I guess I have some little concerns now that we're talking a little bit more about different careers and fields, like in the construction field, electricians, people like that are making a certain wage, and now you're going to have independent contractors that maybe won't be paying that same wage that the other folks are making. So I'll be curious to hear from the witnesses on how all that's going to work. So that's pretty much a question I had, who it was going to affect. Thank you.
Good question.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody to testify in support?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Doug Nelson with Lathrop GPM Consulting on behalf of the U.S. Chamber in support of the bill. We do have a letter from the U.S. Chamber that I'll keep here in support of the position. I think I can try to answer some of the questions that have been raised already, and if not, feel free to follow up with me. What this bill does is this bill does not require an employer to determine, to make someone an employee or make someone an independent contractor. What it does do is it sets forward a test that basically says, we're going to try to be more objective under this bill to determine when someone is or is not either an employee or an independent contractor. So at the federal level, you're going to hear some conversation today about the ABC test, the IRS 20-factor test, which are more subjective in nature. And, for example, the IRS 20-factor test focuses on the type of relationship, the financial control, and the behavioral control. And what 2498 attempts to do is set out an objective standard. So if an employer makes the business decision that I want to hire independent contractors, here are the things I have to follow to ensure that I know they're an independent contractor, that the employee knows that they're an independent contractor, and that the government knows that they're an independent contractor. So those standards in the bill deal with a written contract that indicates that you are being hired as an independent contractor, and if you have to have a license, a professional license, you have that license. 2, that you're going to have to pay income tax, that you acknowledge the fact that you have to pay the income tax or have a business that you work for that is going to pay that tax. And then 3, the employer has the ultimate decision of, I want you to build me this building. And then you have control under the 3rd factor to determine when you want to work, who you want to hire to help you build that building, when they're going to work. And those are the factors that objectively we're going to look at. And then there's a 4th category that says you have 9 factors that are laid out in the bill that you have to satisfy 3 of those. If you hit those marks, that person's going to be an independent contractor. And I think the challenge in the past has been it's a very unclear area of the law. It's a very amorphous standard. And I think what we're trying to do is to make it a more uniform process so we can determine in Missouri that when you qualify here under Chapter 287, which is unemployment, or 288, which is employment security, and those factors are met, you're an independent contractor, and you're not subject to work comp coverage or unemployment coverage. And it truly is, I think, an answer to Representative Bangert's questions. It is the business owner that makes the decision of how they want to operate their business. I want to hire employees, or I want to hire independent contractors. And this bill doesn't dictate what direction you go there. It just says if you're going to go independent contractor, here are the uniform standards that you must meet to qualify that particular person as an independent contractor. That business decision rests with the business owner or how they want to run and operate their business. So I think, again, for purposes of the bill, it just sets a uniform standard. One, here are the objective factors. Two, here's what we're going to apply in the state of Missouri to determine an independent contractor, and it preempts local and municipal. You know, we're going to have one standard in Missouri, and that's going to be the state standard that this body and the Senate pass. Exemptions that already occur in the law, to your question regarding Uber. Uber is already exempt in Lyft under Chapter 387. They have that exemption as a transportation network company that their employees in Missouri law are considered independent contractors. This bill would include delivery network drivers, your DoorDashes and whatnot, to fall under that same type of category as the transportation network folks. It also, to deal with, this bill's been around for 3+ years, and in the past you had an issue with the Missouri Department of Labor because you didn't exempt nonprofits, you didn't exempt local and municipal governments, state governments, and you didn't exempt Native American Indian tribes. And that put us in contrast, in conflict with the FUTA law, the unemployment compensation. There were some concerns in the fiscal note that would be a problem. Those folks in this bill are exempt. So the fiscal note coming out of the Senate had a zero fiscal impact for the state. So bottom line, you know, what I want to close with is this law does not mandate an employer to say you got to hire independent contractors or you got to hire employees. If a business owner running a business decides I want to have employees, they have every right to do that. If it says I want to hire independent contractors, here's the standard you must follow to make sure that you satisfy that and that your worker understands their responsibilities under the law to deal with that. With that, we'll be happy to try to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Okay, any questions for this witness? Representative Bangert, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question. You know, they signed all these documents, the employer, the employee, et cetera. Who checks to make sure that the employee is actually paying their taxes and doing all that? Is there some department that comes in and checks all of that? Or?
No, I think whether it would be the Department of Labor and or the Department of Revenue, I mean, you as a taxpayer have that responsibility to pay that tax and forward that to the state. And I think I don't think it would be any. If I'm an employee and I get my W-2 and I decide not to pay my taxes, I think the Department of Revenue or the IRS are going to fine me. And if I'm an independent contractor and I decide I don't want to pay my taxes, I think the similar process would occur. I think that your IRS or your Department of Revenue would be my guess representative as to who would do that, but it could be Doler as well.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was like a certain department within those departments that specifically that's what they do is check these independent contractors.
I would defer to the Department of Labor, but I would think that they would have a division in that. But I certainly know Revenue, if they're not getting a tax return, probably would look into that as well.
Okay, thank you.
I have one or two questions. So Uber and Lyft are already exempt. I saw that in the bill.
Correct.
And this would, like Grubhub or DoorDash and people like that would be exempt also at that point.
Correct.
So give the committee maybe an example of workers you think would fall under this bill that would now be independent contractors that maybe weren't before.
Yeah, and again, I think it depends on how the business owner decides to operate their business. But I know in the past, Chairman, that we worked with anyone that had an interest in this bill. And for example, the trucking industry. A lot of over the road truckers are hired as independent contractors. I think to the extent that construction and other businesses decide to operate their model, whether that's insurance agents, and run that as an independent contractor, they would qualify. So, if McDonald's wants to hire their workers as independent contractors, they could lay that out. If another business owner, wants to hire those employees at McDonald's, they could do that as well. But it would be, truckers would be one example of who I would give you as someone who certainly was interested in this bill and was involved enough to deal with that.
Any other questions for this witness?
One thing, if I could add briefly, I think there may be some testimony in regard to the state level, federal level. And again, I want the IRS 20-factor test, those 3 factors I mentioned earlier, whether that's financial control, behavior control, or the type of relationship, I think are triggered by these factors that are in the state bill. Written contract, pay your taxes, you have control over when you want to do your work. So to that extent, I think that we can move forward with the state bill, and it allows the state to move forward in a uniform direction.
Any others? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else to testify in support? Please proceed when you're ready.
Good afternoon. Carol Mitchell on behalf of the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We support clarifying how workers are classified as either an independent contractor or as an employee. Clarity as to workers' classification allows the employer to the business to comply with all applicable laws and provide certainty to the worker as to their benefits and their obligations. We believe it's in the best interest for both businesses and workers to have a clear, objective, uniform standard in determining who is an employee and who is an independent contractor. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Yes, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask a question. Why would somebody want to be an independent contractor or employee?
Personally, I would think it's for more freedom. You get to set, maybe your own schedule. You get to choose probably more your hours, your things, you don't need the benefits. Maybe you don't need a benefits. If you have a spouse who can provide the benefits, you're not interested, you want more freedom in your occupation.
Well, I kind of see this as now, to me, if I did it, that I'd have to pay extra in the Social Security and do all that paperwork and stuff myself versus having my employer do it. So me personally, I wouldn't want to be an independent contractor. It just sounds like it's going to cost me a little bit more. I may not make the same wage. I don't know. I just wanted to ask you what you thought, why someone would want to do that.
I think it's more, personally, I think it's more about the freedom.
Thank you.
That kind of brought a question, what you said. Do you think in any way this would bring up less workers who do have benefits? Because that's important in a lot of jobs where they're looking to get into jobs that have maybe retirement or benefits or health insurance. Do you think this bill, what effect do you think that would have on those across the state?
That employers workers are going to be looking more for jobs with benefits?
Yeah, that's a question. I'm
that's
asking because you mentioned benefits a while ago.
Right. I think that's an individual choice, and you'll be looking for jobs. When you look through job listings, they say full benefits. And so if that's what you're looking for, you would be applying for those type of jobs. On the other hand, if that's not a priority, then you could, become an independent contractor.
Okay. Representative Walsh-Moore.
This is more of a comment. Again, I don't really, kind of piggybacking off what you said, I don't know that you'll have an answer for this, and you probably don't, and it doesn't directly concern this bill, but that was my thought as well, is with it being a little bit easier to go to independent contractors, I am concerned that there will be just a flood of companies being like, you know what, we're going to get rid of all of our employees or all of our all of our sales team, or only going to hire independent contractors because, yeah, we'll pay a little bit more in salary to hire them, but we're not paying their benefits, we're not paying their insurance, we're not paying their 401k. And then like fully inclusive benefits and traditional employees are going to be pretty scarce. And I know how hard that is. To Representative Bangert's point of why would you want to be an independent? It's a lot of work. It's already a lot of taxes. My dad and sounds like Rep. Porter have the same job, so I'm very familiar with the struggles of what it is. You know, he's basically a small business owner. He's a 3-man army, so it is a lot of work, and it's a lot on your own shoulders to try to come up with your own benefits and your own insurance. I know we can get into that too, and so I don't have a problem with the bill that I can see there, because independent contractors, they're doing this already. It just kind of clears up the language a little bit. But that was one of my concerns when I read about this, is I could see some employers just being like, well, you know what, we're just going to wipe out the IT force. We're just going to hire everybody as independent contractors, and then we don't owe anybody anything but, the top things. So again, that is not your issue. That doesn't deal with the bill, but it is a concern.
But on the other side, if a worker is looking for the benefits, then those employers would not be able to find the workers if they were not offering benefits.
That's true.
And as Representative Porter said, he's been an independent contractor for 30-plus years, and it works for him. So I think it's individual preference, and this bill just clarifies whether they're going to be an employee or an independent contractor.
Thank you.
Representative Sharp, proceed.
Oh, thank you. I guess I'll go on ahead and ask the question then. How much is a little bit more? Because when we say, you're going to pay a little bit more, I mean, this is the first salary job I ever had in my life. So I guess, but I'm just curious. I mean, I have an idea. I've hired lots of employees, and I've done both ways, and been hired. Well, like I say, this first salary job, but was an independent contractor for a seed company, basically kind of like with State Farm for the other representative. But so as with the chamber, what do we consider a ballpark figure for a little bit more? Is it $5 an hour? Is it $15 an hour?
I don't think I was the one who said a little bit more.
I know, but we did. But
Oh, yeah.
but you didn't put a number on it, and I know it's hard to get a number, but for people that haven't worked in this kind of line, that we're not talking a couple dollars an hour. We're talking, usually when you're foregoing benefits, foregoing insurance, retirement, that number isn't usually like $2. It's more like.
I could not, I'm not qualified to give an amount. I would think, and it would all depend on the occupation, the industry, and maybe there's someone here in the audience who could help more with that.
Well, that was the part, if any other witnesses might take a shot at it, or just saying how much that for the people here or in the audience to know that we're not just talking a couple bucks an hour, that you're usually talking fairly significant compensation for foregoing that part. So
you're saying you're thinking much more compensation if you're an independent contractor rather than an employee.
Why would you do it for $15 an hour and be an independent contractor? Without the benefits. Without the benefits. So for people that aren't not necessarily familiar with it, or the same way for your witnesses to put a few ballpark numbers on where we're talking about in this economy. So.
And I'm happy to investigate that. If we have information like that at the chamber, I will get back with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Young, please proceed.
To inquire. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And you may or may not be able to answer this, but it kind of goes back to my first sort of concern. The word employer seems so loose, doesn't really seem like it has the business owner. It seems to me one of the missing parameters is revenue. So I don't know. I'm stuck on the fact that an employer who makes X amount of dollars versus an employer who brings in way less opts to hire someone as an independent contractor versus as an employee. And perhaps it's because they don't have to pay all of those benefits. It just seems like the bill is missing something to me that needs to determine or set some parameters, like companies that make at least X amount of dollars and over this should at least maybe a certain percentage of their staff should be, a certain percentage of those people should be employees. I don't know. It just seems like something's missing, and you may not be able to answer that or comment on it. Hopefully someone can. The part, not the independent contractor, but the business owner.
What I'm hearing, you're asking what a larger business
Sure.
should provide benefits.
I do.
Have more employees than a smaller business owner that doesn't have quite the revenue that they can't afford the benefits.
I guess I just don't see that it's equitable across the board. You can't, a small mom and pop. You can't compare a small mom and pop to some of the bigger businesses. So anyway, you may not be able to comment on that, but
I can't answer
I've got
that
some
other than
concerns
that's
about that part.
each company's business model.
Yeah. Thank you.
And
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Anybody else to testify in support? Okay. Anybody to testify in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ray McCarty from Associated Industries in Missouri, and I wanted to go first because I'm kind of on the fence between supporting the concept and opposing the bill, and I'd like to tell you why. We do oppose the bill only because we believe it could set up two standards, one at the state level for whether a person is an employee or independent contractor, and another at the federal level. And for that reason, that would cause employers trouble. If you can think about it, if you had someone who was working for you, and under this standard, you could treat them as an independent contractor, but under federal law, you still have to treat them as an employee. Well, then what do you do? As an employer, you would be responsible for those taxes that you have to pay at the federal level. That wouldn't go away. We can't change that with state law. So while we understand what they're trying to do with this bill, we do have to object because it would set up two standards. We think it's something that does need to be addressed, particularly at the federal level. And I think during the Trump administration, they were trying to do some of this, but it is something that should be addressed to make it very clear for employers and potential employers how they treat these relationships, whether they treat them as an independent contractor relationship or an employer-employee relationship. You heard about the 20-factor test. I don't know if you've read them, but the IRS has a list of 20 questions. And I mean, by the time you get done looking at that, you're like, well, crap, would anybody ever be an independent contractor looking at this? But that's what we are left with today. And the problem is the uncertainty it creates. And so I can give you an example. At Associated Industries, we were audited by the Department of Labor because we had independent contractors that worked for us. And we had separate contracts with them. They controlled their own hours. They did their own thing. And we passed, and they were treated as independent contractors. But we were audited, and we only had like 4. And we were not a very big association. So if that gives you, and I know it was a short trip because the Department of Labor building's right across the street, but I would assume that other employers, across Missouri are having that same issue. And when they see the Department of Labor coming, it scares them to death. So we understand the intent of the bill, support the intent of the bill. We just don't think that you can do it at the state level. We think it's something you really need to tackle at the federal level so it applies to everyone equally and you don't leave employers with two different treatments for the same relationship. I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Next person in opposition, please.
Hello. Mark Dalton with the Mid-America Carpenters Regional Council. We're not opposed to independent contractors. We have some sitting in the room with us here. They dictate their own hours. They do their own thing. The problem, and I'll speak to the construction industry, misclassification of workers is a huge issue for us. In 2005 to 2008, there were about 2,900 audits done on misclassification, and they found 384 workers were misclassified. Jumped to 2016, 2,108 audits done, 8,196 misclassified workers that should have been employees. So you can see the issue is getting worse, not better. So I think everyone here is right. We do need to find a solution to the problem. I just don't think this bill is a solution. I think it does create confusion, as some people have talked about earlier. You got a state law, some of the federal guidelines, and it just creates a lot of confusion. When someone was asking about the percentages or the dollar amounts, and in the construction industry, when you hire someone as an independent contractor, you cut about 30% off. So you don't have to pay for Social Security, work comp, health insurance, any of that stuff. You don't even have to abide by the wage and hour rates. So it'll save those general contractors about 30% when they hire an independent contractor. There are different things out there. I believe one of the witnesses had talked about the ABC test. I think if people are sincerely looking at a clear-cut solution, there's an ABC test, which is used in a lot of states, both red states, blue states. It's basically a three-factor test to where are you free to dictate your own hours and workplace? Do you work outside the scope of the hiring entity? And do you have a history of being your own independent contractor? And that's it. I mean, it's pretty clear cut. And when I talk about the scope outside of the hiring entity, so I'll give you an example of what we see on a daily basis in the state of Missouri. We've got a project. There's one going on in O'Fallon, Missouri. Same developer just finished one in St. Louis County a couple of years ago. You've got Thompson Thrift, who's a developer. They're doing an apartment complex, and they hire Smith Carpentry to do the construction work. And then Smith Carpentry will hire a labor broker, and then the labor broker will hire independent contractors or and we have a lot of them that are just getting paid cash off the books. They're not even their own independent contractor. A lot of people with a language barrier, a lot of undocumented workers on these projects. And when you talk about who's going to make sure people are paying their taxes, and if people throw out the Department of Labor or anything else, that is completely bogus. The project that is currently going on in O'Fallon, Missouri, there's video recordings of people talking to the workers saying they do not fill out any paperwork. They get paid X amount cash on Friday. They're told to work, they get there at 6, work till 5, and this is the amount of cash they get at the end of the week. No paperwork, no taxes, no nothing. When that was reported to the local municipality, they said it's outside of their scope because it's a private project. And they say it's the Department of Labor's job. When you talk to the Department of Labor, they say it's the Attorney General's job. The Attorney General says the Department of Labor has to report it to them. Department of Labor does not have the investigators to go out there on the project and look at it. So it's a big runaround. So there are people, and it's been in the media, and it's on video recorded on this projects, and they get paid cash, and there is no one to enforce it, even though it has repeatedly been in the press since the end of last year. So this is a huge issue, misclassification of workers. I think we do need to tackle it, but I just don't think that this bill is the proper way to do that. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Representative Banger, please
Thank you,
proceed.
Mr. Chair. You had mentioned that there's some employees that are paid cash versus a regular employee. Do you by any chance have maybe what the difference in that figure would be if somebody was just going to work for cash versus a regular employee?
Yeah, so these workers that are getting cash, based on the hours that they're told to work and the amount of cash they get, it's about $15 an hour.
They make $15 an hour, and how much
Cash.
would a regular employee make?
For
doing the
someone
same job?
hanging drywall, you'd get about $30 plus benefits. So a total package, $45 an hour.
Okay, so they're making 45 versus the person that they're paying 15.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else to testify in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Jeff Abusi. I'm a lobbyist for the operating engineers, both in Kansas City and St. Louis. We're here to oppose this bill. I won't repeat what the previous witness talked about, but I will tell you, operating engineers sometimes own their own equipment. They do work as independent contractors, but I think as we see more and more of this happen, it definitely creates an issue for people to not pay the proper taxation, whether it be to the state, federal government, et cetera. Also, paying workman's compensation, unemployment, insurance, all those things are a roll-up. And sometimes they get burdened with the cost of being a small business owner, as Representative Young talked about being a small business owner. So we understand that that does happen. Also, on the construction industry, we also see a great deal of liability shift to this independent contractor versus an employee that works for a particular employer. So for those reasons, we oppose the bill, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
I've got one question. You know, we heard a while ago that it probably needs to be addressed, but they didn't think this was the bill. Is that still your thought too, that it needs to be addressed, but this maybe not? You have some issues with this bill, or what's your thought on that?
Representative, I think it'd be great to maybe talk about all the stakeholders that have interest in this particular issue and maybe figure out, you know, what's right for one industry may not always be right for, say, the construction industry. So, yes, we'd welcome that opportunity to have that discussion.
Any other questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else in opposition?
My name is Mark Moreland. I'm immediate past president of the Missouri Association of Trial Attorneys. We oppose the bill. First, let me just echo what Ray McCarty of Associated Industries said, and believe me, I don't normally do that. But this runs afoul of federal tax law. You may allow people to classify someone as an independent contractor in Missouri. It's not allowed under federal IRS rules. And so what ends up happening is the business owner, thinking he complies with this law, makes someone an independent contractor and then gets audited by the IRS. So that's a problem. And specifically, the first sentence, the first modification to the current law strikes that this has to satisfy rules proposed by the IRS. I think that's very ill-advised. To just give a brief example of how this could change things, I want to use Amazon as an example. If you have a 5,300-pound cargo van, you can sign up to be an Amazon delivery person. And in fact, we had someone do that while we were sitting in the cafeteria. It took about 5 minutes. And now you can go deliver for Amazon with your 5,300-pound cargo van. So what does that mean as opposed to being an Amazon employee? If you are operating that cargo van and you get in an injury, you're not covered under their workers' compensation policy. So if now you're sitting out of work because you got injured in a car accident, you don't get health care benefits under work comp, lost time benefits under work comp, any compensation for the injury you sustained because you're an independent contractor. Further, you're missing work, you're not covered by workers' comp, but you're not covered by unemployment compensation either because you're an independent contractor. Further, Amazon didn't pay unemployment compensation benefits into the unemployment trust fund for that individual because they're not an employee. Replicate that a few thousand times by Amazon. Now, take the other end of that. The person in the white van driving as an independent contractor for Amazon creams you. Hopefully, they have their $25,000 minimum policy. Amazon won't cover the damages in that auto claim because they're not an employee, they're not an agent, they're simply an independent contractor. So what have you done? You've shifted all the liability onto the guy with the 5,300-pound white van who's delivering for Amazon. Amazon still really controls the work. It is true the guy can decide to take Monday off, but if he says, I'm going to deliver Tuesday, Amazon's going to tell him what time, where to go to pick stuff up, what order to deliver it, and what time they expect him back. Why are we doing this for Amazon? Further, just having done it out in the cafeteria, there's no background check. There's no check on their driving record. You could have sexual predators coming right to your door delivering the packages that you bought for your kids. But it's an independent contractor. Amazon may not be responsible for that. They may say, hey, that's not our thing. That's right. That's somebody else's thing. So allowing people, to me, this legally allows misclassification of workers. We've geared a lot of our system in our society, our retirement system, our healthcare system, our unemployment system, our workers' compensation system, not by giving government handouts, but by saying when you employ someone, this is our expectation. You pay into unemployment, you have workers' comp, you'll have some sort of retirement package. And what this does is say, don't worry about it. We're going to push it right down to that little guy. And you know, there's a lot of talk about somebody saying, well, maybe they prefer to be an independent contractor. But you know and I know, in most labor markets, when you're applying for a job and you want that job, you're not negotiating your salary. You're not negotiating the health insurance benefit that you get or the retirement benefit that you get. You need the job. And so what you're going to see is employers opting to go to do what they do, save costs. I can save my unemployment insurance, my workers' compensation insurance, my retirement plan, and all I have to do is force that guy to pick up a pen and sign something, and I've saved myself a bunch of money, and all the potential burden and risk is now on that individual. We fought that for generations in this country. That's what this bill would actually allow employers to do. Also, the bill grafts itself onto the workers' compensation statute. So now when we do have issues surround who's covered in a workers' compensation policy, rather than looking to common law agency, we have to look to this statute. Again, you're taking people outside the workers' compensation system and perhaps leaving them with no coverage at all. Because even if the van driver that I mentioned earlier had his own health insurance, that health insurance excludes work-related accidents. So just because he's an independent operator for Amazon, it may mean that he still suffered a work-related injury, and so therefore he's not covered under his own private health care or the workers' compensation system, leaving him uncovered. For all of these reasons, we oppose this bill, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else in opposition? Seeing none, anybody for informational purposes only? Seeing none, that will end this hearing on House Bill 2498.